Welcome to October 4th's Resistance Group Chat. My name is Melissa Ratajczak Ratel, and we are studying Ascension techniques today. We're probably going to go for about an hour and a half, 2 hours at the very most, very most, probably. And I was taking a bit of a different look at Ascension. Instead of looking at yoga or different techniques or things like that, I thought I would go deeper into my specialty, which is literary theory, and looking at Ascension as a form of the hero and of the hero's quest, because we are all the heroes of our own quest. So the book that I'm relying on most today is The Hero Within by Carol S. Pearson. It's a fantastic book about 6 archetypes. Now, archetypes, for those of us that need a bit of a definition, are original examples of things that have been imitated. So if you've read, the Bible, Adam and Eve are the first man and woman. So they're the archetypal father and mother of the human race. Or you have different things like that, like the first hero, the first magician, the first wanderer, people like that. And then Jung took that idea and said that these archetypes are systemic throughout what's called the creative unconscious. So the entire scope of humanity have these archetypes in some form, which is a really cool thing when we look at how we really are all one people in time and place. So to get started, I'm going to define just the quest. The quest is a personal journey to discovering truths about our inner selves. And once we discover our inner selves as heroes, as our pattern of being, then we can better take that journey to enlightening the entire world. And in the archetypal theory, the task of enlightening the entire world is the task of the magician, which I will talk about later on. And it really is about trusting yourself and your own process, because not everybody's the same. So please take these words knowing that no two people are exactly alike, but these are things that have helped others. So when we start a journey, usually, I'm glad this is relevant, Karti. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate.
Can I just add, I've just been thinking the last few days, I was watching an interview, it's a band, Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros, and he was talking about how, we need to believe in magic again, and, I was just yes, we just need to believe in magic, because that's, the only way I can explain a lot of things. So it's kind of funny that you're bringing this up now. I'm excited.
Fantastic. I love that excitement. It's great. And Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros, they're right. You do have to believe in that kind of force. And really, that's a perfect example of the orphan. This is where we begin. It's the innocent stage, or the orphan stage, coming into your journey, learning that magic is there and that it does exist. And I've got a bit of a quote about the orphan. A lot of the times, the orphanic stage is a denial of yourself and a denial of the world. It's the start of your journey. The entire world is this huge, big thing. The dragon, either, it's the huge dragon of the story, the villain of the story, doesn't exist yet. Or you can see it and you're just going, oh gosh, I can't handle that. Somebody rescue me. It's the problem is despair. A lot of the times when we start our journeys, we go, oh my goodness, this problem is so huge. Well, the key to that is hope. And a lot of the times through the orphan stage, it starts out as a quote from Pearson: orphans' denial mechanisms protect them from full awareness of how powerless and needy they really are. Often they will feel it only in retrospect as they begin to experience more success. As they learn to love, they begin to be able to discriminate between genuine love and the daily failures of love. The times we just cannot give, the times we give manipulatively, the times we cannot see one another for our projections. They then can mourn these lapses without giving up on a belief in the power of human caring. So too, when orphans learn to fight for themselves and begin to feel the power to change their world to some extent, they are able to differentiate between situations in which power can be exercised and those genuine instances in which acceptance of powerlessness is a more appropriate and realistic response in struggle. So it really is about learning that in order to learn to love, you have to discriminate between the kinds of love and discriminate between the times when love is the appropriate response or when powerlessness really is an appropriate response, to be able to know that you're not one. you're not alone. So the warrior tends to, I'm nervous. The orphan tends to lead on to another stage, which is either it goes into like the martyr stage or the wanderer stage. And I'm just going to touch on the martyr first because I think that's going to be a big one for us. And the martyr is all about denying yourself in favor of the other or your others. You know, especially being a woman, martyrdom is huge with us ladies a lot, especially in the past few centuries and things like that, and a lot of different cultural thoughts. You know, the women are supposed to be in the home. They're supposed to be denying their own responsibilities, their own passions and joys for that of their family, for their husbands, for their children, for the community. And so a lot of women can get stuck in this repressive state. But I just wanted to, and that's something it's a real struggle out there, you know, to go once you realize that this love is out there. A lot of the times what happens is somebody can go, okay, this love is out there. I want to show that love to everybody I can, so I'm going to deny that happiness for myself, and I'm just going to give it to everybody else to make sure that they're okay. It's a very nurturing thing. It can be at times. But that sacrifice can turn a bit ugly when it comes to our own ascension because it's something that we need to move past. And so I've got another quote from Pearson. It's about transformative sacrifice. Sacrifice is not always a way to manipulate God or other people into giving you what you want or a way of avoiding challenge, risk, and pain. It also can be given freely as an expression of genuine love and care. At a higher level, the martyr is not trying to bargain to save self, but believes that the sacrifice of self will save others. The decision to care, even at the cost of self-sacrifice, is a choice here for life and against despair. It is also the dominant spiritual lesson people have been working on for thousands of years. For some people, the movement from gratuitous suffering to sacrifice in the name of care provides a major sense of pride and self-esteem, and is the transition point out of the orphan stage. So, taking that as it may, what do we think? I'm going to open this up to everybody. What do we think about moving from that sense where the world is huge and despairing, and then discovering this love, and moving into a stage of martyrdom, where at first martyrdom might seem like the ultimate sacrifice, and for women and for minority groups, sometimes we can get a little bit like, oh, well, the sacrifice is just us giving, and the world is on our backs, and if we stopped giving, the entire world would implode and no one would get anywhere, to a point where sacrifice becomes not a bargain for self, but a gift to others. What do we think about that? I'm just going to open it up. David Michael had a question. Sorry, what's exactly his topic? We're talking about ascension techniques, David, through looking at the archetypal, through looking at the quest. So through looking at heroes and stories, how does that teach us about our own ascension, psychologically and spiritually? And so right now we're just going from an orphan stage of beginning to a martyrdom stage where we are giving of ourselves completely in order to help others.
I feel like that is a healthy advancement, and I definitely see how that happens. And I do feel, I think I see it right now in a sense of being, of letting go of, well, it's like the orphan stage would be like, we're kind of here and we don't feel like we're being cared for. We don't know why we're here. We feel like we were abandoned by God. It's kind of the existential basis of religion, I think. And then moving towards opening ourselves up and forgetting our own concerns to the point where we actually share what our real feelings are and experiences are, so that we find so that we help each other find a sense of identity and purpose and community. And so that's the first step of getting out of the orphan stage. So that's kind of how I think about it.
I look at it in popular fiction and popular TV, which is where a lot of people start their journeys. And you always see the hero going through fighting the world and fighting this, that, and the other, and fearing the world he's in as well. So often in many of the stories that people resonate with, you go through the different archetypes as well, and you end up with somebody who's at peace with the world, who's at peace with his own inner demons, and for instance, a lot of the King of Shadows or the King of this, that, and the other, which is the shadow self, quite obviously depicted in popular culture. So I'll talk a bit more about the shadow self later on when we go through the archetypes, but that's how I see it come out in the world.
And I give, just as a little meditation thought, just something quick about, the martyrdom stage. A good meditation for it is to think, what would you sacrifice for? What are the things, the people, the relationships in your life that you would willingly go, okay, to one and somebody has their mic on. If you could close that off, that would be fantastic.
David.
Okay, if we're finished with that, I'm just going to move on to the next stage. It's one of my favorite stages. I don't know if you can have favorite stages of development, but I attach in this culture a lot. A lot of times we move on from the martyrdom stage once we realize that sacrificing ourselves for the good of other people only gets us so far. Because in order for us to help the world to enlighten, we need to move past that sense that in order to do that, we have to sacrifice ourselves, because it's about finding our own balance and our own spiritual fulfillment, and then through that self-activation, being better equipped. So it's about the spirit of equipping. And yeah, it is the cycle that goes from this sense of denial of self to what we like to call the wandering stage, where instead of it being a denial of self in favor of others with the martyr, it's a denial of conformity. So it looks at the martyrdom stage and goes, wait a minute, hold on here. This is a cage. And so there's another quote from the book is, often the hero is told that the cage is Eden and that leaving inevitably will require a fall from grace. That cage is as good as it gets. And that's the thing about martyrdom. A lot of people are told that, no, give of yourself now because this is it. This is all you've got. And so the first job of the wanderer is true sight, to declare or acknowledge that the cage is a cage and the captor is a villain. This is especially hard to do because the hero may not only be frightened of the quest, but disapprove of it. And these feelings and judgments are likely to be reinforced by to the martyr. The urge to the quest may seem selfish and therefore wrong because it involves turning one's back on care and duty in the pursuit of self-discovery and self-actualization. For the warrior, it may seem escapist and weak. If wanderers choose to go on their journey, they may even feel guilty for the act of claiming one's identity and developing an ego classically is portrayed as an insult to the gods. The pressure to conform to one's duty, to do what others want, is strong for both men and women, but it is strongest for women because women's roles have been defined in terms of nurturance and duty. Anyway, so this wandering stage is one where the wanderer flees away from the dragon and goes off on their own on a journey of self-discovery. And so what here have we found in our lives that has helped us on that journey of self-discovery, that wandering stage? Anybody?
It's the classic sort of Kundalini biology breaking through stage, breaking through the initial restricting ego that doesn't let you go anywhere because of you fearing everything and want to retreat from everything. Or at least you have all these perceptions about how life should be in your sort of orphan stage, as you would say. And the wanderer is where everything suddenly explodes in a sort of a intellectual sense, even if it's just that. It can be an energetic sense as well. But you're moving into this sort of consciousness now, and you're going in all directions because you don't know anything at that point, which is a great realization to have, and that's what people say you don't know anything. Because then you can expand quicker, and that's what you realize at that point, where everything's new and everything's different, and the world opens up to you from the crushing ego that you have.
Yes, I noticed that most of the progress that I've made has been through pressure, like crystals, they develop through pressure. And a lot of the push that I've done to go on my journey has been because of, an aversive situation. So, and I also was listening to the archetypes. They're very similar to some of the ones they teach you in psychology, except there's no, I don't think there's a warrior, but there's, I think, the hero and the scapegoat. It's similar kind of thing, breaking it up into those sections. So I kind of understand it a little bit better from what you were explaining to me earlier. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I have a couple of thoughts on some self-reflection when it comes to the wandering stage. I think a lot of times in our journeys, and especially journeys around where we come to places like the resistance, is we see that something about the cage is not right. We see that this cage is a cage. This is not as good as it gets. And it's really easy for us to go, oh my goodness, it's all just filth. It's all just no good. And so sometimes we can completely reject and isolate. And I guess that the issue with getting stuck in a wandering place in our lives is that eventually, through fleeing the dragon and running away from that cage and continuing to walk away at all times from that cage, we can fall into apathy. We can get so consumed by our own self-pursuits that where the martyr felt pain because they saw that others were suffering, they thought they could do something about it. And where the martyr gives themselves to other people, the wanderer is the opposite of that. It's the after effect. It's well, I'm not going to do that anymore, so instead I'm going to go completely for myself. And they develop that sense of ego, and they close themselves off from higher ascension and mental ascension, psychological ascension, like you said, Regina. A lot of these archetypes have duos in psychology because Carol Pearson is a psychologist and a literary theorist. So she is both, and so you do get a lot of that too. And I think that this way of going through the archetypes is a way of going through them with story, as Mark was telling earlier, with popular culture and things like that. And I want to encourage all of us that when you think about this stage, the wandering, another meditation that you can do is like heeding a call. It's making sure that as you are wandering and discovering who you are, how you are, and what you are in the context of yourself and the cosmos, that you can do it with a sense of, as I'm discovering myself, I'm discovering how better to equip myself from later on. Great sages, even I'm using the Bible because it's something that I know a lot. Being raised in a Christian home, before Jesus did his ministry, he went out by himself in the desert for 40 days, and he cleansed, and he meditated, and he focused on the universe and things like that, before meditating, before coming back for his ministry. You see that with other sages and gurus. They go off by themselves and they meditate until they make those self-discoveries, and then they come back. And Cardi says she has a link that might be relevant, so I would love to see it. So.
Oh yeah, I'm just gonna drop it off in chat. Sorry, it's well, I've been looking for it. I kind of typed that out because I know that I can never find it, but it's just this person on YouTube who it's talking about like the idea of you're saying like as we're going through these stories, kind of to have an idea of the context of like where we are, and then but also have the larger view of like not identifying too much with that, so that in the future we learn how to progress, right? A little bit. But so this video is about the idea, here it is, of recognizing what it is when we advance through different levels of like spiritual progress, and whether it be like from a different role in the story or the different chakras or different levels of awareness, like from the individual, collective, onwards. But yeah, so this video is the idea of building that skill of what it is to actually be transforming, and to cultivate that skill of being able to move around in what your roles are, as opposed to trying to get to a final what your favorite role might be and staying there forever, because you're probably not going to have to have that role for your whole life or spiritual soul life.
Absolutely, yeah. It's going to be really interesting to watch that video. That's fantastic. And I think that you jogged my mind just there. Another question that we can ask ourselves, and I will ask to the group, like if everybody can think about this, and then if you could give an answer, that would be fantastic, is how do you explore your world? What are the methods in which you explore the world yourselves? Is it, Kundalini? Is it... Everybody, I'm really excited to hear guys explore.
I'm glad you asked that question. I explore my world through like parallels. I look at things where there's common denominators, and they have to be relevant and useful. And one of the things that I've noticed is that when I do that, they usually follow a common trendy thing, especially since I've got here at the Resistance, is that if I'm thinking about it, usually there's someone else thinking about it on another level. It may not be exactly the same thing, but they're using similar parallels. One of the things that I've noticed that we were talking about today has to do with your talk, and it just hit the parallels when I was hearing you explain it, was the masochism, the Martism, not masochism, excuse me, Martism, and the parallels between Martism and the heart chakra and intent, because I've been focusing on those things lately. And the only thing that changes intent is your heart. And the only thing that would change your heart, or the direction that you would want to go on, it would be the intent. And keeping that perfect balance between the two has a lot to do with the movement in between the different types of characters that, like you were explaining. Like, I think we move between different people or aspects of different archetypes as we go along, and depending on where we are. And I was talking with Mart in the chat the other day about intent. It was just really on my mind, and how that falls into everything. Like, we don't get out of bed without having intent, and you don't leave your house without having intent. You don't even eat without having intent. And so and looking at how powerful intent is by itself, and thinking about Martism, I would think that why a person might particularly sacrifice themselves for someone else would make a big difference. The reasons why someone sacrifices themselves makes a big difference, and the heart would balance that out. So I thought those were really good parallels to what you were saying, Melissa.
Fantastic. Yes, it is. I think you're absolutely right. It is that it is a part of that journey. And so I guess back to the question of exploring our world, Regina explores parallels, things, finding that and that kind of thing. What about some of the other people in our conversation? How do you explore your world? How do you see the world through, more of a lens of truth, as far as you can see stages? How do you go about looking at something and discerning whether or not this is something that will help you in your self-actualization, or not? Like, how do you find that discernment? Or have I confused everybody?
What was the question?
What sorts of things do you use to discern whether something in your life is going to help you, whether it's going to help rise you up, or whether it's something to
yeah, if there's, I mean, there's all kinds of things, but usually there are some patterns that, like, I get this twinge. It's like a visceral kind of thing where you get like a twinge of like, I went through this already. I don't have to go through this again. This is not an advancement for me. This is, do I really want to regress back into this? And it could be like, just like in the stomach, I guess. You just I get this feeling. Or it will be an ease, like if there's like a real ease of flow without a sense of desperation, or like too many challenges surrounding it, like it's good to have some kind of like excitement and resistance and like flow and like force behind the advancement. Like, that's not bad. But like, if there's just something that you're like longing for, or you're trying to make happen, and it feels like everything is kind of falling in your way. I mean, to me, so far, I've taken that as a sign that it's not healthy for me.
Yeah, it's interesting that, because I notice that a lot of the time when I'm teaching self-defense, especially when I'm teaching self-defense, well, basically, one of the similarities between self-defense for children, like I start them at 5 and then go all the way up, and teaching self-defense where I got started in a university setting, in being an assistant professor in a university. The one thing that's the same, because sometimes the techniques change, especially because you're not going to teach a little kid Krav Maga, which is a very brutal, like, break them to pieces, leave them on the floor crying for their moms. You're not going to teach a little kid that, because they're not going to be able to do that, and they're not going to be able to understand what they're doing. But the one thing that's systemic is teaching the intuition. You're teaching that, hey, you know that little voice in the back of your head, or when your hair stands on end, or when you have that thing in the pit of your stomach telling you, is this if there's something about this person that doesn't quite feel right, if there's something about this, if there's something about that we should trust those instincts. And that by trusting that intuition and those instincts, we can end up saving ourselves from a lot of situations. So I'd like to encourage you that trusting those instincts and maintaining those instincts and healing those instincts when we might get a bit of a hiccup in there, that is the best things that we could do to self-actualize.
Yeah, and it carries into so many different things. Like I coach running, and like there's so many little tiny tricks that like could help. Like if just the body awareness, like I'm all about like the body awareness, so like the self-defense kind of jogged my mind about that. Like if you kind of go with like the rocks, and you learn how to run on an uneven surface, and you're aware of like your arms so that you're going to be able to balance yourself out, and all these things work together. And it's not just about like the mechanical, like doing the perfect form, because you have to just adapt to everything. You just have to be loose, and like, so you have to like shake out while you're running, and you have to adapt and be ready for slight changes that happen. And it should be easy. Like, you should never be going up the steepest part of the course when there's a little like ravine, that like a little like stream thing that maybe you could run along that's a little flatter, and stuff like that. Like, it should go easy. Like, you should be using your tendons when possible, as opposed to like the short fast twitch muscles and stuff like that.
Now, Mark and Carolyn are having a very interesting talk in the chat, and it called them up. Can you just, is there anything that you want to say about what you're talking about in the chat, guys?
Well, I realise that some people say the controllers can only use repressed energy. They can also use positive energy as well. It's just they prefer repressed. I don't know if it's easier to box up or easier to use. I'm not sure why, but it's because there's so little energy actually moving. See, when you realise parts of your shadow self, and I was going to talk about the shadow self, so I'll give you a quick quote to see where I'm coming from. This is from Kundalini biology. Instead of an endless battle with our own or other people's shadows, I find you just have to plough ahead with your greatest contribution and expand your talents, and let people have their own mind without trying to change things. If one tries to do shadow work in a lower order, unconscious social environment, then all one will get is more and more shadows. And I've seen that with people I've tried to battle shadows, not battle, but try to help them with the shadows as well, or battle, I suppose, in some occasions. But for people who can only operate at the level they are operating on, to do real shadow work, one can probably only do it with peers or superiors, or people they have a connection with, I think. Otherwise, it's like doing a highly destructive drug and committing spiritual suicide. The bottom line is one cannot penetrate and evolve the mythic, near-medieval, superstitious mind, the mind that must penetrate and evolve out of its own condition. Because if you do try to raise it, it will fight back and complex in on itself. And I've noticed this with people I try to help. But the thing we were talking about is, see, because we've got all these shadows around us, and the way to actually release them is work on your own shadow. And when you're talking about what we're exploring our shadows. That's what we're doing. We're finding out what we are and what we're not. And that's part of the higher archetypes you're talking about. So I think the controllers, if they had a control of more of what we were, which is obviously their role because they're in the controlling role, then they would have a lot more energy to work with. So the whole thing is repressed. They're more repressed than anyone. They're working with the negative energy rather than harnessing the positive energy. So if I were in their shoes, I'd be looking at a way to control positive energy on a massive scale, unlike anything you've ever thought of before. But that's just me. That's why I think they're a bit repressed themselves.
Yeah, in my theory, to go along with what Mark said, I would immediately ask the question, how is that? Well, it's, for lack of better words, negative or lower energy ways. Well, how can that move? Well, that's because, everything has two sides. So even if they're operating on a lower and with such all of what we are, then there's a negative and positive side. So that's why what the controllers do is effective, because it's still moving, it's still operating. We aren't operating our higher potentials, but it's just like Mark said, because even if we were operating in a higher level for themselves, the ones we want to be, they would have more energy too. But they're still expressed anyway, because although it might be a lower level, there's still two sides to that lower level, and the two sides, somewhat get moved or put it into action. I don't know if you guys understand.
So I only caught part of that because I'm getting a bad connection today. So I'll ask you can type a few things out in chat as well, so I could respond if that's okay. While I'm doing that, I'll read the part about the biology and the mind and why meditation actually works, if that's going to help people. Robert Sapolsky humorously equates the prefrontal cortex as the neuroatomical equivalent of the superego. So that's part of your brain. For anyone just wondering what all these big terms are, the superego is the regulating supervisor in us that makes us do the right thing, even if it's harder. The prefrontal cortex, and this is where I feel myself, the logical parts of the brain where you actually have original thought coming online, and I feel that quite definitely the more and more I expand. And it's the part of the brain that defines us most as human, and it's one of the last parts of the brain to fully myelinate around the age of 30. Robert suspects that there is a direct correlation between the number of myelinated prefrontal neurons and impulse control, empathy, gratification postponement. So it's all these things, what the adult does and what the child doesn't. Kohlberg's stages of moral development, integration of the shadow self, i.e. non-projection, and knowing oneself, that is spiritual maturity, emotional intelligence, and integration of the triune brain arises with prolific neuron development, prefrontal lobes, and the interconnectedness to the other brain areas. The prefrontal cortex is the pilot or chief organizer of the evolution within us. That is the key to the mental and spiritual health, to have the prefrontal lobes operating at a compassionate, beneficial guardian instead of a belligerent, narcissist, or nihilist parent. Does our inner king divide and conquer, or does he unite in benevolent grace? And meditation is the key to accelerating this development where you are. It allows these areas of the brain to actually grow at a faster rate, and for you to take on board all your shadow selves and the things in you, because you're just shutting down and actually rebuilding. And it does this on a biological level, and also perhaps on another level, because you're putting yourself more into the spiral of time. So you're actually going to your environment and integrating into it more, so you can accelerate your own growth. So I hope that helps some people out.
Yeah, I think that does, and it leads really well into what the end of the wandering phase looks like as well in your own growth, because the end of the wandering phase comes back paradoxically to community. It's as they resolve the conflict between love and autonomy by choosing themselves without denying their yearning for connection, the seemingly impossible conflict dissolves. In the way of seeing the world, the reward for being fully and wholly ourselves is love, respect, and community. But for most of us, the full enjoyment of this reward does not come until we gain the warrior's ability to assert our own wishes in the relationship, and the magician's knowledge that there is no scarcity, that we can have all the love we need as our birthright. We do not have to pay for it by forfeiting our lives. So that leads us into a discovery about the warrior. And the warrior tends to be, in popular culture, the warrior is the hero, the valiant hero. It's the Avengers in the movie that just happened by Joss Whedon. It's the valiant person. It's Aragorn from Lord of the Rings. It's those people who are always, the valiant and sword and shield man, the head of the comic books, the protagonist of the video game. It's all of those people. And I just would like to ask, before I get going on what the warrior phase is actually about, I wanted to ask, when you think of a warrior or a hero, what does that make you think of? Like gut reaction, what does that make you think about?
People who operate within their root chakra on the 3D plane.
We have the root chakra. What else?
I would say the solar plexus, the warrior, the hero, whereas the orphan for me would be the fear and the root chakra, just because that's the emotions you get in the root chakra. Still the animal kind of chakras, but building up to the heart and to connection, as it were. Yeah, that makes sense, at least on the higher levels.
All right, one more. Who else? Anybody else? Anybody? You can type it if you don't want to speak. I'll just read it out.
I was thinking to join this conversation, but my view on Ascension is absolutely different, because by the end of my life, I'm going to keep my body with me, and I'm seeking for a knowledge of transforming and dematerialization. This way, if you go into another state, you can take your body with you. If you learn this state, your body becomes immortal, as you can recreate it anytime, in any environment as it was originally your memorized. So, for me, Ascension is understanding myself, my body, my structure of the world, and when I learn this, I'm gonna be ready for actually ascending and learning more knowledge about it. And for that, I will probably need my own body. As I understand, you guys are planning to lose your bodies doing the ascension. Am I right?
No, I'm looking at being able to actually come out of the body as well as ascend with the body. So I have both options. I think I'm drawn more to ascension with the body if possible, because you retain more energy, as you're suggesting, when we can enter the physical domain when we want to. So that's what I'm looking to do. The ego death can free up a lot of energy, though, in the body. You're not constantly projecting reality that doesn't exist or trying to enhance illusion, if you know what I mean. So working on the ego can assist you with the physical as well.
The good thing about this, you don't need to go any heavy physical, some kind of experience. You just need a large amount of knowledge about how the body sustains in this three-dimensional world and how it should be traveling through the dimensions. Most of every particle in our body, even smallest one, is a free loops of energy. So basically, it's not a solid matter. If you want to turn your body into a glowing light, you just need to know how to do it. It will do it. You can the brain should have this function to produce necessary commands for producing such how to say it, to make the particles turn to another dimension. The only thing, when you're turning them, you need to understand where you're gonna get in the end, because if you're gonna leave three-dimensional world, you're gonna appear somewhere else, and you need to know where exactly you are going to.
I think we all are here to ascend or descend, at the highest level, level possible. And like, as far as the people on the line, we're not planning to. I'm coming. Give me a sec. We're planning on ascending at the highest levels possible, carrying all our energy with us, and we are familiar with ascending with the body. The thing is, it's a choice. It's really it's a choice.
Absolutely. And I think, I speak for myself when I say that practicing a physical ascension with my body is something that I would like to do as well. That's, my goal. I think for today, I took the conversation into more of a study into the psychology behind ascension, into the different mindsets that we find through the quest and through discovering the quest. There's different stages of ascension, just as there's different stages of our meditations and our experiences that we have to have in order to have gained the ability to work with that amount of energy to deny the ego and to ascend body, mind, and soul. So, Val, thank you for that. Thank you very much. And
I've got one more thing. I remember I saw the video and some info. This is the name I linked into our chat of Tibet monk, which was studying the life circle, how to sustain his body without food for many days, and he was very great in everything. He was in history. He was the greatest one, and when he died, before he write the message for those who will be after him, that he should be kept, and after that, after some years, his grave should be opened. And when the followers did this, turns up he was alive. He left his body in a state of meditation for more like 50 years. And if you're gonna find his in Wikipedia is full history of this event, I think, and there are videos in YouTube about him. He's now a sacred person, as I know. That's the thing is, when he was leaving the body, he left it in a state of continuing to live in a meditation state all he learned through his life, he put in the last state for his body and left it for us to learn from it. That's it.
Wow, that's fascinating. I'll have to look that up. And for the people that are not that are listening to this later, the monk's name again is Dashi Dorzho. So that's DASHI DORZHO. I think it's Dashi Dorjo, I think, because I think the ZH do something funky.
I did want to say it's the same with Almine. If anyone, I often bring her up, but it's the right brain Ascension. She teaches a lot of it. But again, she's ascended the body, and it's a similar situation, Val, if you wanted to research her as well. There are a few ascended masters that do that kind of thing, that have abilities that transcend time. They return in their own bodies and come and go as they please. I've linked, just for the benefit of anyone who's listening to this later, I've linked Don Miguel Ruiz. I apologize if I'm pronouncing his name wrong. It's Don Miguel Ruiz, Ruiz. He's done a book called The Fifth Agreement, where it teaches going beyond belief, because this will be the sort of mastery stages of the archetypes, or at least the magician, the adapt to mastery. The Toltec shamans would teach or state that whenever you have a belief, you no longer perceive what is. So I've linked his things in that in chat for everyone. But it's if you can dissolve your beliefs, or use, for instance, mastersoftheuniverse.net, do duality dissolving procedure, which is a very mechanical way of doing it for us who use the left brain. I'll link that in chat as well. I have them printed out by my bed, and every time I want to just do a bit of work on dualities, I just go through the procedure, and it dissolves. Some dissolve instantly, some take a bit of work, just like anything in life. So I'll link that in chat, and I think it's mastersoftheuniverse.net for anyone listening.
Fabulous. Thanks, Mark. And I just want to say that brings us perfectly, actually very organically, into the warrior stage. And so a lot of the time, some of us can get into a system of, warrior, that's, I don't know, that might be a little bit too forceful. It's kill or be killed. There's a lot of negativity that goes along with warrior, with war. And in popular history today, the wars in the Middle East, wars in different places, the Civil War in Georgia, different things like that. All of these things that are going on that look at and go, but that's just about killing. It's just about a lot of these negative things. And so I just wanted to speak of the warrior as a stage of self-actualization in our lives, to be able to discover more about our ascended selves. And so I have another quote from Pearson's book. Again, it is, the quotes I'm making are from The Hero Within by Carol S. Pearson. I have the expanded edition. The warrior says to the orphan within, "You do not always have to look for someone outside yourself to save you. I can take care of you." This archetype helps teach us to claim our power and to assert our identity in the world. This power can be physical, psychological, intellectual, and spiritual. On the physical level, the warrior archetype presides over the assertion that we have a right to be alive. The warrior consciousness includes self-defense, a willingness and an ability to fight to defend oneself. On the psychological level, it has to do with the creation of healthy boundaries, so that we know where we end and other people begin, and an ability to assert ourselves. Intellectually, the warrior helps us to discriminate, to see what path, what ideas, what values are more useful and life-enhancing than others. On the spiritual level, it means learning to differentiate among spiritual energies and theologies, to know which bring more life and which kill or maim the life force within us. The warrior also helps us to speak out and to fight for what nourishes our minds, our hearts, and our souls, and to vanquish those things that sap and deplete the human spirit, by speaking the truth about them and by refusing to countenance them or to allow them in our lives. So what I see that as meaning is, in order for us to take ownership of ourselves and our development spiritually, our development intellectually, and all of our developmental phases, we need to be able to look at ourselves and say that we can take care of us. And I think that actualization, that acceptance of our own personal rights and boundaries is really the lesson of going through this more aggressive stage in, excuse me, it's a little bit of a cold, in our development. And I wanted to move on just a little to another part about the warrior, because a lot of, in the system, like in the system that we're in the cage of the system, the warrior is kill or be killed. It's the victor, to the victor go the spoils, and if there's a contest and I'm the victor and you're the loser, then you should suffer for that because you didn't win. And that is the struggle of a warrior, is learning to get past that fear-based response. So I'm just very quickly going to open it up again and ask, what do you think is both a negative and a positive part of a warrior stage?
Well, I would think that the negative part for myself would be to always be putting up perimeters, trying to see what I need to protect myself from instead of just doing. And the positive would be that I could use my own individuality and intellect to be able to make my own place in the world outside of the regular boxes and squares that people have, or that 3D has designed for me already. And to be able to stand in that it makes me feel really good to be able to stand being different and knowing that I'm self-assured that the direction I'm headed in is correct, even though I see a lot of people around me not headed in the same direction, you know, where I live at, or the people that I generally are in physical contact with. So I think that would be my positive and negative.
Thank you, Regina.
I think these are all critical to set up as well. When I first went into the Ascension stages of losing the ego completely, I didn't have the foundation. I didn't have the warrior personality established. I didn't have the magician's personality established as well. I know we're defining them perhaps a lot, but it's helpful for many people to get a handle on these things, especially people who work logically. But if you don't have the foundation, you're going to crash when you try and ascend. If you try and eliminate the ego entirely, for instance. So now I have much more of a foundation. I can make a greater push for it. And it works the same on the energetic level too, because more things are integrated than they were before, much more. Still get tested now and again, which is great, but that, you know, just bringing the shadow self into integration, that's the way I'm looking at it now. As far as the warrior goes, finding the shadows where they are, finding out the parts of me and integrating them. So I suppose it's moving beyond the warrior stage, but it still has that foundation. If you see them, you're still confronting things, you're still loving them, you're still seeking them out to find yourself. So you need that foundation in yourself for it to work.
I see what you're saying, Mark. So, because everything has a foundation, unless you're like a complicated being like us, where you have a chance to try to shortcut, skip over, ignore, and turn away from, instead of like all the opposites of those things. If you were going the opposite direction, then you wouldn't have the foundation by trying to, say for instance, get rid of the ego. You'll get to a certain point where you at least need the foundation, right?
Yes, exactly right. Exactly right. Without that, you see, you're just going to trip and fall. Or you're going to go too high in the clouds and nothing's going to make any sense to you anymore. So you need these modes of operating. You need that core there.
I think that this stage is actually incredibly important. And I think a lot of people tend to try and skip it. You know, in certain ways, some people, I'm generalizing, so apologies if there's, you know, a lot of people going, hey, that's not true. I think that a lot of people can go from this wandering self-discovery into okay, you know what? I've made my self-discovery as a wanderer, and now I'm straight to being a magician, to discover the authenticity and the boundlessness of the universe without accepting the more aggressive tones of the warrior. And I know that we've had this in different resistance chats before, where there's been a little discussion on really what the upside of anger is. Because anger, tempest, those kinds of emotions, they can be so negative because they can go off the handle and fly into a rage, and you never feel like you're accomplishing anything other than being mad and being angry. But what is the upside to that? What is the positive part of the warrior? It is, you cannot act upon an issue or a problem without feeling that issue or a problem, either intimately or as part of your landscape. And so really, anger, the warrior, it's about justice. It's about intensity, as Mark just wrote in the chat. It's about passion. It's about being able to actualize and activate your feelings upon your environment. And I've got another quote from The Hero Within. It is, in each modality explored so far, our hero has learned to deal with a difficult experience. The orphan dealt with powerlessness, the martyr with pain, the wanderer loneliness, and now the warrior confronts fear. The levels warriors experience then are also related to how well they have learned to confront fear. So it's the fear of not acting. It's making sure that we fall into a pattern of going, well, we got out of the matrix. We are learning what we need to learn. We are activating ourselves. We are ascending. We are practicing all these wonderful techniques that are genuinely helping us in our lives and the lives of this community that we have, this family of the resistance. If that's ourselves to the point where we're no longer touching the greater world at large, and I think that's where the danger is. In isolation, in that wandering stage, which is why the warrior stage coming in at the wandering stage is so precious, because unless we go to this warrior stage, it is harder and harder for us to activate the truths that we found and enlighten others through our lives. And I'm not talking about getting on a soapbox and preaching on street corners, but our lives rightly and ascendedly in the place where we are. It is about finding our foundation, saying, you know what, it's okay that this is my foundation. It is okay that this is what I believe. This is my right and boundary. I'm up for this. And I'm not going to walk over me. At the same time, I will also tell you why this is my boundary and why I think this should be your boundary too. And so I've got another quote here, is the problem of human difference, because this book was written during the Cold War. So she does bring in a lot of things about, the West versus the East versus the, all those different things. And so she was explaining in that what to do with that kind of fear. And the problem of human difference is hard to confront when you are yearning to make an ideal, humane world. One of the central ways martyrs try to make the world better is to give up parts of themselves that do not seem to fit what others want. Warriors change other people. In both cases, sameness is seen as a prerequisite to the creation of a loving community. We either change ourselves or we get rid of it or transform them. And what that ends up turning into is that orphans see themselves as victims and wanderers as outsiders. But by defining oneself as having no power in the culture, one does not have to take any responsibility for it. To identify oneself as a warrior is to say, I am responsible for what happens here, and I must do what I can to make this a better world for myself and others. And it's about a process of being aware of suffering, and then moving from that suffering to telling the story and an acknowledgement to oneself and to others that something is painful. And the hero replaces the absolutist belief that in slaying one dragon we solve all problems for all time with the belief that we continue slaying dragons our entire lives. He or she learns that the more we slay, the more confident we become, and therefore the less violent we have to be. That's the trick of it. And it's, again, going back into my martial arts training, because that is a huge part of myself as well. It's Mr. Spot one day, well, what's the difference between 3rd and 4th degree black belts? Because we have different degrees of black belts. And he just kind of stepped back and he went, well, As a 4th degree, I learned how to hurt myself and others less. And that really is the trick of the warrior stage. It is getting past the explosive, oh my gosh, grrr, rawr, slaying of the dragon, and moving into this phase where you're able to go, I have ownership of that dragon because I am part of it, because I am part of this world, and I am responsible for the culture that I am in. And that's the key, I think, to converting and taking responsibility and becoming a proper warrior instead of just someone who fights. What are your thoughts on that? Yeah, ownership instead of denial. We cannot just kill the dragon and expect that to fix our problems. But remembering that the dragon is there because of the actions of ourselves and our communities, we can better understand the landscape of where we are, and only then will we be able to truly start on destroying, I think is a negative turn, on converting the dragon, or discovers that acceptance of ourselves and our unloved parts. So I'm going to open the floor again. If no one has any thoughts on that, I can ask a couple of questions to lead conversations, so please let me know.
I was reading an interesting quote here, that the shadow itself has the seed of... let's just get to the quote. 1 minute, I'll just bring up the quote exactly so I can read it to you. In the case of the individual, the problem constellated by the shadow is answered on the plane of the anima, that is, through relatedness. In the history of the collective, as in the history of the individual, everything depends on the development of consciousness. This gradually brings liberation from imprisonment, unconsciousness, and is therefore the bringer of light as well as healing. As in its collective mythological form, so also the individual shadow contains within it the seed or conversion into its opposite. Seed of enantiodromia, but it's the conversion of its opposite. So every shadow has... It's just on the dual plane, the answer is always there. That's what it's saying. And it is, it's just finding mechanisms of being able to see that answer quite quickly. So you're not stuck forever in these loops, which is all they are. They're just your shadow self continuously reflected to you until you can accept it as part of yourself, until you can see the seed of why it's there. So that's why people keep stumbling, because they're looking at themselves and not being able to see that it's part of themselves. Or at least what part of it is them in it.
Spoken to resolve the warrior, really. That's what that does. So I like that. So does anybody want any questions or meditations on the warrior, things like that? Like spending some time meditating and thinking about what it is you think is wrong with great social problems, or the threat of environmental alienation, world hunger, things like that, global thing, and then taking that down into, well, what are the problems of your community? And taking that down, problems of your friends, and then considering these simple questions. 1, if you had the power to act, to do something substantial to help find a solution to even one of these problems, would you do it? It seems like such a simple question to ask. Well, would you do it? If you could, would you? And number 2 is there something you could be doing that might really make a difference now? And if so, imagine a workable strategy for doing so. And I think the best part about us being part of the resistance and being part of this kind of environment is that those kind of questions, if you had the power to do it, would you? You don't have to do it alone. There are other warriors around you. Or maybe they are wanderers who need to become warriors. So what can we think of right now for ourselves and for the problem, not the problem of, but the discovery of further ascension? What are some things?
About the warriors, bad thing about it is the warrior goes with the strength of the will, and if it's facing something new which maybe in past he crossed it and it was uninvolved, not evolved enough, and that in the past was absolutely pointless, and he passed it through, and now he's facing a new, the same thing but more expanded and grown up. He may regret it to admit that it's worth it of attention, because he already done his choice and he is walking away. So the warriors, it's very difficult problem with that, because when they taking their path, they never step off of it. The good thing about it is, like, the warriors, when they go, they never stop. So the only thing you need to know where, what exactly you are doing, and if you step into a warrior path, you're gonna always leave for yourself a gap where you're gonna fit all those new things and changing your mind as well, because not everyone can do this how to say it, well, help me a little bit. I lost the word.
What is there another way you can explain that? Like, is there another way you can look at that problem?
The choice which warrior does is the strength of the. If he goes with a strength of his will, and he's done a choice, he will never go back and change his mind. And you need to have. And this is the bad ability of the warriors. If you're not gonna change it doing your warrior path, you're gonna fail eventually. That's what I want to say.
Okay. Yeah. So, I'm just gonna ask you a question, and I hope that clear it is. Are you thinking that the warrior gets so fixated on the dragon at hand that they can lose focus on other things, and that it can consume them, and thus they become the dragon in that negative sense? Or are you thinking that if warriors just get fixated on defeating dragons, oh, there's one over there, there's one over there, there's one over there, and trying to defeat and kill and really destroy those dragons, that they're missing the part where the point of the warrior is to see those dragons, defeat a dragon, and then go, wait a minute, I am responsible for this. I am responsible for this dragon being made. I am responsible for this dragon being there. And once a warrior realizes that, that's when they're able to make the jump into the magician stage of discovering authenticity and balance. It's that.
If you take a situation when the warrior and his task is to kill a dragon, and he is facing a dragon which exactly the one dragon, one task, this dragon, he must die, and the warrior takes this task, he will kill it. However, he will ignore how old is this dragon, how much knowledge he contains, and why he's doing this. Maybe he got a reason, a good one, and the warrior's will of if he step on a path, he never turn back or turn our way. He gonna do it till the end, no matter what.
Okay, so it's the persistence of the warrior that they can persist in their task and their goal of killing this dragon, and then miss all of the knowledge that they could have gained if they had looked at the dragon another way.
Yeah, possible.
I like that. And Regina just posted this wonderful little thing that I'll just repeat in the chat. She said, I am the dragon. I am the dragon slayer. I am the victim of the dragon, and I'm the one who profits from the dragon too. And that is a big part of it. And just as Val says, I think that, yeah, definitely we can have warriors, and we have many of them in our culture and many of them in our day and age who go, it's the dragon, I shall fight it no matter what. And the dragon's going, hey, dude, I am just trying to show you the next path on your quest, buddy. Like, if you could just listen to me for one moment, and you can see, I am not trying to burn your village, I'm not trying to take your women, I am trying to teach you something. Or maybe that dragon, that problem, is trying to teach something else. I know that I had the hugest problem when I was doing a lot of meditating on my chakras is activating my solar plexus chakra. It was just incredibly difficult. It was the biggest dragon. And it took so many problems of powerlessness and so many problems and so many actual things in my life, that situations that I thought, oh, this is too much. There's no way I could do anything against the situation. And so I kept fighting at it, going, no, I have to become self-activated and powerful. And I realized that just by spending so much time going, I have to do this thing, I have to conquer this, I was missing the point of being powerful, of finding your own power within yourself. So I got so focused and fixated on that act of killing the dragon, of destroying the dragon, that I missed what the dragon was saying for the longest time. It ended up taking me, Mark, how long was it? A couple of months, I think, just to be able to work with the solar plexus chakra at all. So I guess that's just a personal example. What can we say, going now from the warrior into the magician? Because I think that is where the bulk of ascension takes place. We have to go through that orphan stage of denial. We have to go through the martyrdom of self in favor of others. We have to wander and deny the conformity in the cage. And then we have to accept personal rights and boundaries, personal responsibilities for situations, and attempt to fix situations and things like that, in order to come to the place where we realize that, I've got a quote for the magician. I'm just going to read it to you because I think that says it better than I ever will. Was that magicians understand, hold on, where did it go? That courage and audacity involved in asserting themselves and their will on the universe when they themselves are not yet whole. To do so means letting loose their demons upon the world. Actually, because we are all co-creators, whether we want to be or not, we run this risk all the time anyway. However, magicians take responsibility for this process and basically trust it. If dragons are but their shadows, their unnamed, unlived, unloved parts, then the only way to transform them is to act, and by acting, bring them into the light of day. Yet some discretion is required in the scope of their action to avoid calling forth demons too great for them to handle. And that's part of a section called Naming the Shadow. Discovering, as we were discovering earlier, that the dragon is the shadow self. It is the unloved, unlived parts of one's own self. So I'm going to open the floor on that. I know people probably have a lot to say about this one, so let's let the floodgates go. I open it up.
I usually get the magician when I'm using my tarot, and then I usually get, many times I've gotten the moon card that goes along with the set of cards that I get for that day with the magician. And the moon card is the shadow self, and the magician, you just explained what that is. And together I realized for a while, when I kept getting them over and over again, that I needed to work on that part of self, and was interfering, in my opinion, of me progressing, because my intent was to progress. I mean, if one doesn't want to progress and wants to stay where they are, I suppose it wouldn't matter. But I do. So I started to do some work in those areas. And when I decided to have the intent, yes, Carolyn, to do something more with those energies and acknowledging that they were there, and acknowledging that they were part of myself, and actually embracing my shadow self, and embracing my fumbling student, which is the magician, with all these different things that we're studying. Things are turning out a lot better. As long as my intent is good, or what I deem to be good, I stress that because someone else might not. It seems to work out good, but just keeping myself objective, that someone else may view what I'm doing differently, and that they're entitled to that also, is helping me balance out that the darker shadowy self with the fumbling student, the person who has all these different gifts and abilities that I've discovered and doesn't quite know how to do practical application yet for all these things. So it's a transition, and one that is really a roller coaster ride. And I don't really particularly like roller coasters. As a matter of fact, I don't like them at all, but I know it's a necessary process for me to get to where I want to be. So I kind of use this with my daughter when she wants to learn how to do something different and it becomes difficult, like learning a new piece of music or advancing and learning how to play a violin or learning how to draw something better, that when we have something and we like doing it, and in order to advance that, sometimes we have to go to a stage where we're doing something that we don't like to do with our talent that used to be fun in order to advance it so it can be fun again. And so that's the way I look at my own journey also. It can't all be fun, and especially if it's going to be useful. Yes, back to intent again. So definitely need to balance out the shadow self and the fumbling magician that has all these wonderful things that can get everybody, including himself, into trouble. And it's like right where I'm at right now, is finding out ways to use practical application.
How do we separate out the shadow self?
Sure.
How do we separate the shadow self from old patterns? For instance, I felt the adrenaline rushes of Ascension when I went outside and did gardening, because it's something I never wanted to do, never had an interest in, but I realised it lined up so many things in my life. So when I started putting my energy into that, it freed up a lot of energy. How do we separate out that from patterns that we also think are things in our life that also we don't do, but for other reasons, if you know what I mean? So how do you define what the shadow self, where the energy is held up? You know what I mean? If there are patterns, for instance, that would take us down a road that isn't fulfilling of growth and things like that, I would label them as not useful either. So I would steer away from them. But at the same time, there's a very fine line between that and denying parts of yourself, isn't there? Because those patterns are part of me, and I have to love them. But I don't necessarily wish to engage in things like old computer games, which I know I could switch on now and play for hours on end. And love the process of doing it, but it wouldn't actually propel me into growth. It would shrink my consciousness again. So because I've experienced that, and anytime I turn them on again, just focusing on the same state over and over again shrinks your consciousness. So while I can love and accept them, I can't integrate them in that way. Do you know what I mean? So how do you separate out old patterns from shadow self?
I use my heart. I use my heart. And what has been a really good tool for me to be able to separate the shadow self from who I intentionally would choose to be now. And those things just don't disappear. They need work. They need to be maintenanced, and they need to be, through meditation and through trial and error to learn to balance those things. So I use being objective. I literally take myself out of myself and observe myself as if I'm someone else a type of personality I wouldn't appreciate looking at me. And then I do a self-analyze kind of thing, like a checklist. How does the person that I'm being right now look at me and I literally try to intentionally have an outer body experience while going through the checklist. And when I do that, I'm able to look at myself, the darker parts of myself, more objectively, without feeling like I'm being attacked or attacking myself or, getting into the poor me's. I take the emotion out of it because I'm the one that's doing it, even though I'm doing it as someone else. And doing that, when I do that, I use my heart. The same love or the same objectivity that I want to use with other people, other religions, other cultures, so on and so forth. I use that with myself, and I give myself that softness while I'm doing it. So it becomes like a full circle. Matter of fact, when I think of it, it's like working with a whole bunch of different spheres that you're juggling. And when you sort them all out, well, when I sort them all out, I end up with something that's more tangible to work with when I'm looking at myself in the mirror, and I decide this goes here and that goes there, and this I don't want anymore. I can throw that away. And this, oh, I know exactly what that is, and I don't have to use it anymore. And I'm going to try a little bit more of this. So, or you really need to work on that, Regina, because that's not going to be working for you if you plan on being, at point F, and, it's just not going to work. So I'm able to do that a little better. I hope that helped. That game that I play with myself of when I self-analyze, not as me, but as someone else, that would be extremely critical, is the key for myself, and using my heart chakra and love.
Regina, and we're seeing a couple of interesting things happen in chat that I just wanted to make sure that we expanded on too. I love what Regina is saying, so all you listening in the recording, go back, listen to it again, take notes on it, really, really get into that, because that was excellent. Now, Mark is asking about the highest intent and how we can see what our highest intent is. And I thought I'd share another quick quote from The Hero Within about the magician. In this view of the world, that is the magician's view of the world, the job of heroes is to enlighten the world by loving it, starting with themselves. Their task is not to slay the dragon, within or without, but to affirm the deepest level of truth about it, that is, that we are all one. Such dragons are only our shadows, our unnamed, unloved parts. There is an inevitable conflict between the magician's evolving notion of the universe and the warrior's perfectionism. We live in a culture that does not trust process and is intolerant of diversity. Therefore, we are all expected to be perfect, and beyond that, to be perfect in similar, if not the same ways to one another. We are supposed to live up to standards of virtue, achievement, intelligence, and physical attractiveness. If we do not, then we are expected to repent, work harder, study, diet, exercise, and wear better clothes until we fit the prevailing image of an ideal person. Thus, our unique qualities are likely to be defined as the problem that we need to solve to be okay. In this case, the magician's role is to name and acknowledge those differences as sources of our individual and collective strength. So I think that really it's about our intent is about learning to love our shadows. It's about learning to look at our shadows and go, this shadow is here. Why is that? I love you. I name you. And they had in the book right above that, there was actually a quote from Madeleine L'Engle's works from her Wrinkle in Time series, where the heroine Meg succeeds in naming those evil things that are trying to kill her and take her brother away and create a world of chaos because they're just going to destroy everything and make a void. And so she ends up throwing her arms around one of these little void objects, these little dark things that just suck away every bit of individuality. And she goes, I hold you, I love you, I name you. I name you, you are not nothing. You are, and you are named. My arms surround you. You are full because you are me. You are full because you are, and just the point of that little thing in that little quote in here was to go that sometimes I think we work so hard, especially when we're working on ascending, to go, oh, look at all these bad parts about myself. I have to take them out of my brain. I have to excise them and throw them away and completely just, eliminate them from myself. And what remains will ascend. Well, it's all ourselves. It's an experience. I think that going through this book, The Hero Within, going through these archetypes is so important to Ascension because it creates, instead of being one that excises one's dragons and just cuts them off and shoves them aside so the rest of us can ascend, it takes it and alkalizes it. It creates a situation where the magician goes in and goes, this rage, or this apathy, or this disfigurement, or this thing, this part of myself that I've hated so much, that I have felt that had nothing good to do, that was just ego and just needed to be removed. This is what it was saying. And being able to decipher what it was saying to the point where you can wrap your arms around it and go, I love this piece of myself. And then fix it, because we don't have to stay stagnant. We are not stoic. Like, the human race is not a stoic race. And so going back to what Val said earlier about, warriors can be, and I'm probably grossly misquoting Val here, so please don't mind. When we were talking about warriors can be so single-minded in destroying a dragon that they can miss all of the wisdom that dragon had, that's the job of the magician. To look at that dragon and say, oh, okay, here we go. And only then are we able to discover the authenticity of the universe. And through the authenticity of the universe, the balance and the wholeness in ourselves, our lives, and the others around us. Because it's not I and the other, it's us. I guess it's kind of similar to being in a relationship, in a way. I don't know. I'm just learning. Patience. I just wanted to close that part, just my little rant there, with one last quote about the magician. After learning to change one's environment by great discipline, will, and struggle, the magician learns to move with the energy of the universe and to attract what is needed by laws of synchronicity, so that the ease of the magician's interaction with the universe seems like magic. Having learned to trust the self, the magician comes full circle and, like the innocent, finds that it is safe to trust. And then very briefly, many misunderstandings arise from this. The wanderer's independence often looks to the martyr like selfishness the martyr abhors. The warrior's assertiveness may appear to the orphan like ruthlessness. And when the magician proclaims that if the response is genuine, it is perfectly fine to act in any way, including all the ways you formerly feared and rejected, it sounds to almost everyone else like the worst kind of license. At the magician's level, however, dualities begin to break down. The orphan's fear of pain and suffering is seen as the inevitable underside of a definition of safety that assumes that life should be only pleasurable and easy. Magicians believe that in fact we are safe, even though we often experience pain and suffering. They are parts of life, and ultimately we are all held in the Creator's hand. Similarly, magicians see that it is an unbalanced focus on giving that creates selfishness. The task is not to be caring of others instead of thinking about oneself, but to learn how to love and care for ourselves as well as our neighbors. Magicians see beyond the notion of individualism versus conformity to the knowledge that we each are unique and we are all one. Beyond strength versus weakness, they come to understand that assertion and receptivity are yang and yin, a life rhythm, not a dualism. Finally, they know that it is not even possible to be inauthentic, for we can only be who we are. Inevitably, we do take our rightful place in the universe. This is the last quote I have from the Hero Within today. So I am opening up the floor again. What do we think about that? What does that make us think about in our own ascension?
My own risk. I'm going to share something. I don't know why that pops up for me, but I've been going through some sensitive stuff and family stuff, and I'm like looking around. There's some trees around where I am. Sometimes I talk to them. My favorite place is the porch, and I just couldn't seem to get into that meditative state where I was able to juggle all these different feelings and emotions that I've been having to deal with lately. And I was thinking about a friend who told me that don't react, like it's my choice whether I react or don't react. And I was trying to find a vibration of meditation that I could just stay at there for a while, and I'm talking about maybe a couple weeks if I have to, in order for the external circumstances to level off. And while doing that, I just couldn't get a grip. Finally, I was like, I'm important too. I want to mean something too. I want to feel like like what I have to say is meaningful too. And I want to feel special too, you know? And I just really, and it wasn't from a place of anger with the individual that I'm struggling with. It was now, wait a minute. The whole time, it shouldn't even be a place of anger or reacting or not reacting. It should be, that's where it's at. I have the right to feel special too. I have the right to feel safe too. I have the right for my opinions to be meaningful, you know, and I have the right to feel loved, and that what I feel, think, and need is important. And knowing that I have that right, I mean, really, really knowing that, not just saying it because someone else told me to regurgitate it. I actually really felt it for the first time in my life. It was so deep. I'm feeling that on a deep level. And there's a more of a calmness that came over me, and I'm now able to do that. I'm now able to, I think that I found my point of meditation where I can now be at that non-reacting stage without feeling so raw, you know. And I don't know really from this emotional place that I'm in what that had to do with the discussion, but I felt like I needed to share that.
Here's a piece of me which that's really beautiful, Regina. That is I'm just a piece of me that keeps coming up, and obviously is a piece of me that I would like to say I love and accept, and I do. But it still comes up, so something is missing. Obviously, a piece or a block or a shape is missing. When somebody challenges, it's not even, see, I can't even specifically define it, because it's not when I have a belief that somebody challenges, unless it's a critical sort of core belief, which I've hedged a lot of emotion on, you know, I've put a lot of myself into, and I know generally helps heal the world or something like that, and then it's sort of nudged out the way just by a very aggressive kind of attack, you know, not sort of somebody disagreeing with it, but a very aggressive kind of move on it. Then I always react in the same way, almost instinctively. And it is instinctively. I catch myself often enough, but the thing's still there. So I don't know which part of me there is missing. How I can sort of change that. I always feel the need to help somebody if, for instance, on health, if somebody were to come and say, I don't know why you don't eat normal foods. That's how it would usually be put to me. As in, because I buy organic and I actually do all these things, and I often go to it for them and think, how can I help them, and describe the benefits of organic. But I'm still, you see what I mean? It's always that instinctive thing that I have to clarify the point of view. That's the best way. I have to clarify it. But I'm not sure why it's there. I don't know how to fulfill it or how to finish it, you know, accept it completely.
Really quick, you guys, sometimes we actually do have to ask, because we work on ourselves. We have these habits, and I'm learning now that I really can't. It's even still hard for me to say do it all on my own, but I do find the relief in knowing that in sharing, I excel. For me, sharing is like, it's not like meditation for me, but sometimes it produces the same result. Like, well, anyway, back to the point. Sometimes we have to ask, like how Mark was just saying, we don't know, maybe there's a piece missing, you know, and things like that. Sometimes you just have to put it out there and ask in order for you to get what you're looking for. We do it in our minds, we do it with each other, and we do it with ourselves, and we know everything is one, but we have to remember, we do have to ask. You do have to put it out there to the universe and ask about it, because sometimes I get stuck in like a circle. I do. And only when I go to wondering and thinking, like in deep thought, the answers don't come to me like some people say, well, I thought about it for a long time, and then the answers finally came. It doesn't really work like that for me. If I put it out there, it comes back, what I'm looking for. So I just want to put that in there.
Thank you, it did, yeah. Rather than clarification, I need to ask questions. That could just be the whole thing. Thank you.
Yes, Mark, yes.
That brings me to an excellent point of, I was actually just going to get to questions to ask for the musician stage. So hopefully in here there will be a question that helps you, that helps me for sure. I'm going through it myself. So there's just some journal exercises or questions in the book. But the magician stage, I'm just going to read a couple. One is, this is something that might help some of us. Write a brief description of your life right now and how you, out of the wisdom of your being, have created this life. If you don't like certain elements of your life, describe the good that will eventually accrue from even these less desired parts of your reality. So that's one thing that we can do. The second one is, what is your shadow? You can get a clue by what qualities drive you crazy in others. What might you do to begin to integrate the shadow into your own psyche? And then there's another question of, whom and what do you love? What makes your heart sing? What do you find hard to love in yourself or others? Are there any ways that you would like to expand those limits? And another question is, if you were completely authentic and true to your deepest or highest feelings and perceptions in every moment, would you act in any way different from how you are acting now? I think this goes in a lot with the thought of, if you were completely faithful to your dreams for your own life and those around you, what would you do? So if we were able to be completely authentic and true to our deepest and highest feelings and perceptions, would we act any different than we are now? And I think by looking at possible disparities there, we are able to see where our shadows lie. And then thus we are able to name our shadows and discover how to integrate those shadows into our full and whole and balanced selves. Thoughts?
What if you create your own shadow and just present it to the people and stay behind doing your own work?
I think Ursula Le Guin, in her Shadow Sea series, it's a fantasy series, said there was a character that she had that decided that because he was the best magician in the world, he would do the most complex spell in the history of creation just to show that he could. And I think that for that character, he ended up, what he did was raise the dead. And he raised all these dead, and all of a sudden there's all these dead people walking around, and then they all turned into zombies and created this. And of course it's a storybook, so, but I guess psychologically going into that, it was his action of going, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to reveal my shadow, and his shadow was one of pride and one of fear of death. So the counterbalance to that is discovering that, he was immortal if he chose to be, if he chose to ascend in himself. I think that, it is a danger to reveal one's shadow and then go, okay, revealed it, bye, and move on to something else and leave that shadow there festering as a dragon. And I think that's why sometimes we'll find someone else's dragon in one of our caves. I think at some point a warrior can come by and go, there's another dragon right over there. And, whether it's something in somebody else's life that they go, wait a minute, no, this is a dragon that you need. And they see all these things and they perceive all of these things in other people's lives when really it's somebody else's dragon. It's a part of their dragon that they left behind and didn't treat, didn't dissolve, didn't accept. So I think that eventually that does come out. And I think that those things, personally, I think those things will eventually either stall your development or they will make a situation where you have ascended, but the possibility for you to have ascended in a deeper way is denied you because you lost that bit of your own journey and your own struggles. I see, Marianne, you have a question. Can I get you to rephrase the question? What's my first time coming to the light? Coming to the light as in, you know, this sense of ascension or this sense of storytelling? What would you like to hear? Learning to face shadows. I have a bit of a tricky one, I think, sometimes. I know personally, the first time I remember really facing a shadow was when I was 3 years old, and I was staring my mom and dad's divorce in the face. My family was breaking apart. It was splintering. There was a lot of fighting. There was a lot of, I could feel my mom's stress and her fear and all of that energy. And as a 3-year-old girl, that just terrified me because I went, these people don't know what they're doing. Oh my gosh. And I would just run into my bedroom in the townhouse we were in and curl up in my bed and just pray and just be like, oh, I can't do this. Oh my goodness. You know, I just freak out. I just start freaking out really. And I started seeing that fear of being displaced, of losing my father, of experiencing all of these negative things because the family unit was breaking down. I went, oh, that's a shadow. That was a huge, and it was a physical shadow for me because I would dream about this inky black shadow coming in and everything and destroying a lot of the things that I loved. And so what I ended up doing was just going, there has to be something deeper than this. Even as a little 3-year-old girl, I was going, help. And I would dream that angels came to my bedroom and that they protected me and they told me that it was going to be okay and that this is there, but you can overcome. And then later on in my life, I think I grew, and then later on I was in university by this point, studying English literature and human kinetics and like anatomy and physiology. So I was a double major, and I got into a relationship that turned abusive. And he had locked me in his basement. I wasn't allowed to leave the house. I wasn't allowed to open the windows. I wasn't allowed to do. So I was in this physical shadow space again, but I had been manipulated to the point where I thought this is for my own good. And I realized, wait a minute. No, it's not. This is ridiculous. And I got out of the relationship, but now I look back and I see that situation, and I'm so thankful that by going through that, I've been much more capable of learning about other people's pain, about seeing the ways through a quest and through a journey, and being able to let go of the pains and the things that can be horrible situations in ourselves and make us feel like victims, when I find it so powerful now looking back on my life and seeing that I went through that. Oh my gosh. And it's a blue sky today here in Vancouver. The leaves are turning color. It's a beautiful day. I'm in a beautiful place in my life. And I could have demonized that man. But I saw fairly immediately that he hadn't done those things out of malice, but he had done those things because he himself was breaking apart and he didn't know what to do. And so through me leaving him, and that made him see all of these other things, and he himself has changed his life. And so, you know, every once in a while I'm like, oh, I hope, and I send all of my positive vibrations over to make sure that he has an awesome life. You know, I think that was, you know, another example, another way of learning how to take a dragon and see that really that dragon was a shadow of other things that were going on. And by able to see those origin points, being able to clarify the situation and find the good in it. I don't know if that helps.
It does help, Melissa. Stand by. Let me see if I can get my mic to work. Can you hear me clear?
I want to share one thing.
Oh.
I passed a similar situation in my family when I was younger. However, I learned another thing. At one point, I decided that if I'm gonna take all that pain every time, well, the life gonna put me into a hole on the road or something like that. Eventually, I'm gonna break down or end up in some kind of place where I will be very stressful and won't be able to enjoy the life as it is. So at this moment, I am the dragon inside of me, and I'm building shadows in front of me and sharing them letting them out into the world. For example, my friends knows me, who I was and who I am inside, but only few of them. Others, the people who surround me, they see only a shadow which I created, shadow of the person. And everything that shadow experience, I store, rethink, and then upgrade the shadow and send it somewhere else. And I've got like 3 or 4 models of the shadows, and different groups of people knows different shadow, and they sometimes, for example, coming into my place and they see skills and my interests, some papers, some drawings on the walls and everywhere, and they surprised because they didn't expect me to be interested in something like that. They just thought I'm just normal, regular guy, very, very nice and gentle to everyone, and for a good company. So for my personal defense, I'm sitting deep inside of myself and judging the world from different angles, putting myself in situations which doesn't really affect me from inside. So I can experience a pain or breaking with a relationship, but I never take it personally. I always take it as a lesson for myself, how to do it next time better. So if anyone have something to say about it, I will listen.
I have a few things. I don't know which apply to you personally, because obviously I'd need to know you a bit better. It could be it's a good reflection of what's going on in society. People retreat from themselves. If it's a retreating thing, this is one aspect to it, and they surround themselves with sort of personal armor, if you know what I mean, personal personas. They think that was generated, for instance, when the cataclysm hit the Earth. Whatever that was, there's a lot of theories about what it is, but the after effect is the important thing for us. That's when the persona and the ego came into survival mode, as in we're going to protect ourselves from everything. Our neighbours, the animals around us, other people's beliefs and ways of living and being. So that was that's a possibility. Another thing is you found a different method of ascension, and you have more control, and perhaps it's not rather than split it, we could say it's perhaps both. You're identifying parts of your persona more easily, and therefore you can move between them, which is an adept kind of thing to do. But for me, I would, just for me, because this is the way I'm ascending, would release all that. I just throw off the armor, and then you move towards your lessons much more quickly. But that's just one method of ascending that I know. I know there's many others out there, but just to give you some things to research, Jungian psychology comes to mind, and that would show you, I don't know if you studied it, but it would show you the personas on the outer levels of self, the animas, and also the masculine and the feminine, and how they all fit into the construct that you seem to understand quite well.
It's not really a quicker way when you're taking it personally, because when I'm creating a shadow and I'm thinking, what if I would be a different person and would be in different relationship with different people, for example, which won't be social with a person who I'm presenting now. So I create the second shadow, absolutely different one, and get a relationship with a group of people which absolutely different interests, different points of view, and I'm investigating how they evolve and how how everything is going on around them and why they judge people from different angle and how does it work. And that's why that gives me opportunity to see from point of view of 3 different people, because I've got right now, for example, 3 different shadows, and no one of them, if, for example, if the company of people will decide that they don't like me anymore and they breaking up with me, I won't be really taking it personally as a painful thing, because I will just learn and recreate the shadow and go forward.
I've dropped 2 links in chat for you showing the diagram, because to me it fits together in a visual image, because I'm very visually minded. So you have different personas that you can react with the world with and use for different tasks. And when you can develop them consciously, they can be quite useful, as you're finding. And it's how actors, for instance, are successful at their trade, because they develop different personas for different roles and things like that. Projection of shadow is also, it can be projected onto other people in that way. So you're reflecting what you need to see, or what you need to, how you need to evolve. Your higher self is giving you that lesson from the other person as well. So when you're using different personas, you might be able to accelerate your growth by, it depends how much of a handle you've got, if you see what I mean, but you might be able to receive different lessons from different angles. I don't know, personally, I can't do that because it's not my field of expertise. It's just to give you ideas. Those 2 links at the bottom might help you a little bit.
Yeah, Mark said something there about like how actors get to their trades, and it reminded me suddenly, Mark, you reminded me of all the work I did in theater, and I had gotten started at a very young childhood age at being in theater and film and acting and things like that, all the way up until in university as well. Now I own a multimedia company, so I direct actors at times and things like that. And just I was thinking suddenly about how it was I came upon a role, and how it was that I actually took a role. Like when I got cast for something, in order for me to play the role effectively, I had to be able to read that script, read between the lines of each piece of that character. And I had to be able to put it in my mind that I could accept every single action and every single feeling and every single word that character said. Because otherwise, the character would end up being this self-loathing or confused thing on the stage, and it would be this chimera of confusion for the people watching. But what made it effective for me, being an actor in that environment, was being able to say, I accept you and I love you. And I played a lot of villains. I played a lot of, I was very good at playing a lot of those kinds of characters, or characters like Antigone in Greco-Roman tragedy and all those things, the daughter of Oedipus Rex and all these different roles that some of them were quite heavy, but being able to accept that for that period of time, it was almost like hoarding. It was like becoming a piece of this dragon's hoard. And I was that dragon for a while. And then when the role was finished, every single time I finished a role, I had to go through this process of letting each of those things that I accepted go, so that once again, when it was all gone, I could find Melissa. And it meant reinvention a few times, because it got a little bit heavy. It's like when Ridley Scott, the Oscar-winning director of Gladiator and Blade Runner and Kingdom of Heaven and American Gangster and all those movies, he said in an interview once with a bunch of young filmmakers, he's like, if you are the same person at the beginning of a film project as you are at the end of a film project, if you are the exact same person, you have failed in directing and producing and writing. You have failed in your task of creating that movie. Because through the course of that story, you have not learned something about yourself and the universe, you're doing it wrong. You're not going deep enough. And I kind of, that philosophy kind of stuck. And I think that looking at Ascension as looking at the heroic archetypes as a quality of emotional and physical and spiritual ascension, being able to take the story of the quest is a little, I guess it's a little bit like being able to think a little bit more like an actor and being active in our own experience. Now, Mark just said, when you've learned what you want to learn, throwing off the armor is the way to go for pure ascension. Keep the persona when you need them, by all means. That is an adept trait. But there are many methods of ascension. I think that's an excellent thing. We've reached our 2-hour mark, so I think that in order to make sure this doesn't eat up too much of your guys' day, I don't know, you could probably go, okay, enough already. We can have our thoughts open up to discussion, and then if we're all finished up, we can end the call. So it's up to you guys. What would you like to do? Carolyn, let's go with the flow.
Does anyone want to do what I did and just get anything else out there? Anything they think they wouldn't share with anyone? We can take it off the recording and just help each other with it if you're more happy with that.
Does anyone have any questions about anything we learned today? Anything that we went over? Just so that we can kind of anything that okay. I don't think anybody does. Or stop me now. I think we.
One question, really quickly. Has anyone found any good? That's so good. Has anyone found any effective, universally effective methods of helping anyone else look at their shadow? Asking them to ask questions is perhaps a good way. I don't know if anyone else has found that.
I was going to share. Go ahead.
Well, just really quick, I found that looking in the mirror and detaching, like if you look in the mirror and you just look at your outer, just look at your body, look at yourself, look at your face, like in the mirror, and then saying to yourself, that's not me. I don't know, it works for me. I'm just putting that out there. I find that it really does, it kind of gives you another viewpoint, of another thought and another visual of what's going on as far as with you and universal. I don't know. It's a brain expander for me. Like it expands the space in my brain to be able to take in, dissect, understand more. So, it helps.
Okay, and Regina had some comments that she wanted to make.
Well, this is talking about the shadow and some people, and I was listening to Val when he was talking. It's called segmented, like people live segmented lives, and it's a thing that they're studying. Well, it's actually a category in psychology where they call it disassociation. And when people dissociate from, like, you share this particular aspect of yourself only with the people here, and then you would have one face you show to your family, another to a spouse, and so on and so forth. So, and you keep them completely separate where no one crosses over, nothing seeps through. It's called segmentation, segmented lives. And it kind of falls in a category like when we were studying of the dissociative disorder or borderline personality. And it's funny, when you study sociology and the way group dynamics are and the way people interact, there's a lot of people doing that more and more these days with the group dynamics, where we'll do just what Val was explaining. Like, I don't bring this aspect of myself to school, although I have shared it recently with one other student, but just one. So that was a big change for me. And I don't talk about what I do here with my husband. I keep that to myself, but I do talk about it with my children. So, and I can't talk about it with my mom because it's just, she's definitely not going to want to hear what I have to say, and it's over her head, and she gets aggressive when I mention anything outside of her normal realm. So some of that is keeping ourselves safe. And I believe that some of it is learning how to juggle and adjust the new dimensions of self that we're obtaining. Not all of the things that are shadows have to be bad, because in my opinion, that you can't enjoy or you really wouldn't recognize the light without the darkness. And the shadow is just an in-between place. It's actually a balance of the two. And so learning to utilize them properly to have that balance is a better way of dealing with myself in a more healthy way, if there are things that can be incorporated without hurting other people.
Very important for the person who does like me. What are you collecting, actually? Because there is a point inside where you're collecting the things which you learning from outside world. Some people just jumping from one. I know good examples when people jumping from one shadow to another, finding themselves a place in the world. But when those people meet and they saying you like decide who you are, and then we will see do we want a relationship with you. In my case, I'm collecting precise pieces of personalities, and I'm learning them from different people and trying to inject in next shadow in evolution, keeping them for myself. And then people coming to me and I close the shadow in front of them and I step in front of them as I am with all that I learned doing my research in the shadows. They amused. They don't. Most of the people don't believe that such personalities exist. That people, one person can contain that many good, for example, character abilities, many different shapes. So very important what you are collecting inside of you. What is your main goal? Why you're doing this?
Because the main goal will reveal which part of us, which part we're here to actually fulfill, I suppose, in the end result. The earthbound pursuit of it anyway.
All right. I'm just going to, unless there is any further discussion wanted, I am going to close this off today with one last quote from The Hero Within by Carol S. Pearson. That I think will just help all of us finish this off in a nice little circle at the end. It's trusting yourself in your own process means believing that your task is to be fully yourself, and that if you are, you will have everything you genuinely need for your soul's growth. If you find you are too attached to a particular outcome, that you are trying to force it to happen the way you want it to, and that you are suffering with lack of success in doing so, this is the time to cultivate the magician's faith in the universe, in mystery, in the capacity of the unknown to provide you with what you need. Recognize that what you want and what you need are often not the same, and that it is quite rational to trust the universe, God, or your higher self and let go. So I will end our discussion with that and say thank you very much for everybody that's been on the show today, on our discussion, and for all you people listening at other times. I hope that this conversation has in some way affected and helped your personal journey and your personal ascension. And I just wish blessings and wholeness and balance and activity on everyone. So this has been hosted by Melissa Ratajczak Ratel for the Resistance Group Chat, and have a fantastic day.